Hello, my name is Juliette Valère, and this is my webcast on applied language acquisition. What is language acquisition? It is the process by which humans acquire the capacity to be aware of and comprehend language, as well as produce and use words and sentences to communicate. The content area I will be focusing on is history or social sciences. The three theorists are Michael Long, Stephen Krashen, and Bill Van Patten. Our big question today is how can instruction best facilitate language learning? We will be focusing primarily on second language acquisition. First, Michael Long. He believed that when learners are engaged in understanding and producing messages in the context of actual acts of communication are the conditions created for acquisition to take place. It is in this environment where they are in true understanding of the actual language that they are able to acquire their second language. He believed in the interaction hypothesis, that social interaction has been seen as the matrix in which acquisition takes place. The input provided should be comprehensible and a path to learn a second language. Michael Long created lessons that made meaning, and that's what we should do to provide structural language support and continually give feedback. We need to create the classroom conversation so that small group work is increased and interactions between students is filled with discussions about the content. Multimedia and technology can support the students as they interact with the text so they can see places and historical facts, people, and events in another way. There is no agreement as to whether instruction should be based on a traditional focus on forms approach, involving the systematic teaching of grammatical features in accordance with the structural syllabus, or a focus on form approach involving attention to linguistic features in the context of communicative activities derived from a task-based syllabus, or some combination of the two. In this theory, we see that the approach should be between grammatical instruction as well as communicating that. Stephen Krashen had 5 hypotheses that changed the path for second language learners. He believed that there's a difference between learning and acquisition, the conscious versus subconscious. The natural order hypothesis is the order in which items are acquired based on individual students' repeatability. The monitor hypothesis is if we are supporting too much, it causes dependentness. Not enough is a lack of understanding, but that we should support just enough when needed and necessary. The fourth hypothesis is the input hypothesis, where the students have time to internalize information by preview, practice, and review. And finally, the effective filter hypothesis, where the reaching of the language acquisition device is access and the filter is open to receiving instruction. The student is able to acquire a new language. Stephen Krashen said that in history instruction, the importance is to make meaning in the modern day world through this continual discussion. This theory must be adapted according to the different situations in which students experience language acquisition. Applying the 5 theories can be varied based on subject and content. Speech and language acquisition should utilize this hypothesis by developing a positive learning environment where the language acquisition device is more able to acquire language. Students should have support when necessary, but not too much that it goes to waste. And in English, we should model language structures, especially in the context of history. We discuss many events that can be applicable to our modern day world, and we don't need to isolate the situations, but bring them into focus in the general education classroom and in our English language development classes. Finally, Bill Van Patten was the founder of the processing instruction theory. This discusses what the learner pays attention to in the input affects complete understanding. Processing instruction exhibits an advantage because of its greater gains in interpretation. The input is useful for the brain to come to an understanding without extensive rules or outside supports contributing. It relies solely on the ability to come to understand what is accessible by the working memory. As learners, we make sense of what we can understand, what has been inputted into our brain. And every person has their individual limits of holding information and making sense because it comes at different rates. Taking away other factors and focusing purely on the input allows learners to activate their engagement. He believes that students should be described as language acquirers through the instruction of a language facilitator, to realize that we never fully arrive but are continually making strides towards proficiency. His theory is all about authenticity of practice and implementation in the classroom. How can we do this in history? We can create discussions that are based on the text at hand and those events to make more personal. Students are the ones communicating to each other about the subject matter with instructors and their peers. I like to group students for discussion and sharing their thoughts, summarize information, and listening to others. In our social studies curriculum, we like to have students take leadership roles and provide instruction themselves. The references are here. Thank you for listening to the information about applied language acquisition in the content area of history.